phony war campaign for the next general election, should it come in May or indeed autumn of next year.
I'm interested on your take on where Labour is at the moment. There's a great debate on the Sunday morning show yesterday with Sir Trevor Phillips between Alistair Campbell and Craig Oliver about where Labour is at the moment. Are they set, I guess, a two-part question, for a majority as things stand? And what would they have to do to get a big majority, which Alistair Campbell was seeming to suggest he thought was possible, but if there was a vote today, they'd be some way off?
Well, if there were a vote today, then I think it's highly likely Labour would get an extremely large majority. The question we and other pollsters ask is, if there were a general election tomorrow, which party would you vote for? And consistently over the last few weeks, Labour has had a lead over the Conservatives of around about 20 or more points. Now, that's large enough to get a majority of going on for 300 at the House of Commons. So even if the lead was only 15 points, they'd still be on for that. But the most important thing to remember is that that is only a snapshot of where public opinion is at the moment. And we know, as indeed do the people taking part in the polls, that there isn't a general election tomorrow. And there won't be until potentially May or perhaps even autumn of next year. And between now and then, things could change dramatically. Historically speaking, you would expect polls to narrow. Tony Blair, for instance, during the time in which Alistair Campbell was working for him, enjoyed leads much greater than Keir Starmer is enjoying at the moment. And at one point was at 57.5% in the polls, which is well ahead of anything Labour has managed this time around. And yes, he achieved a large majority, but by historical standards, the numbers needed to bring about a majority of just two are still very significant. It's estimated that Labour would need to achieve a swing greater of that than Tony Blair achieved in 1997 in order to just get over the line. To get a very large majority, they need much higher than anyone has ever achieved in post-war British politics. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen, but what I'm saying is that, historically speaking, it's never happened, and you would expect it to be very difficult to happen next time around. I think a lot will depend on the party conference season and how the parties emerge out of that, because that could set the tone for really the rest of this year going into Christmas. And on the other side of Christmas, there's really not that much time in political terms to bring about a big change. The Conservatives could, of course, improve their position. They could improve their position significantly, but so could Labour. There is an awful lot still to go, and nothing can be taken for granted at the moment. All we have to go on are the current polls that are a snapshot and the historical precedents that we already have.
And Joe, just quickly, clearly this time last year there was a story that was a gift that kept on giving for Labour in the mini-budget that went so badly for the then government. What do you make of this schools story, the metaphorical image of a crumbling Britain that it's allowing to be part of the narrative? Could this be a lasting and damaging story for the government in the polls?
I think on its own, probably not. But the difficulty that the Conservatives have had for months and months now is they simply cannot buy a good news story. Not that I'm suggesting they're trying to buy them. But what that means is that time after time, when they've tried to seize the initiative, when they've tried to paint a positive picture of their leader, of their policies, of their government, what they find is that things get in the way. And that can be resignations fueled by Boris Johnson leaving his Uxbridge constituency, or it can be schools crumbling. Some of these are within their control, some of them are well outside their control, but all of them help to cumulatively damage the perception that people have of the Conservatives in their minds.
Joe, thanks so much for joining us. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Joe Twyman, the Delta Poll co-founder there. Time for a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
High pressure will dominate this week, bringing heatwave conditions and potentially the highest temperatures of the year. It'll be mostly very warm today and hot in the south, but it will be windy near northern and southwestern coasts. The afternoon will be unbroken sunshine for most, but the far north will be cloudy with a little drizzly rain.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, crumbling concrete. Of course, a big problem for the government and schools alike. We'll be speaking to an education company next. The Education Secretary has told Sky News that it will likely cost millions to fix crumbling concrete at schools across the country and that the money will come from her budget. But the issue of rack concrete has raised concerns that failing material could expose asbestos. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says she's not concerned by that possibility.
It's not just rack, there's other maintenance that you have to do on schools, which is a normal part of school building maintenance, but you always need to know where asbestos is because the health and safety executives say it's best kept in situ as long as it's well covered and not disturbed.
And my question is, are you worried about the crumbling concrete exposing asbestos?
Well, that's why these surveyors have the asbestos. No, I think these are building surveyors that will, figure out their way around this. They've got the asbestos plan and then they know what to do with rack. So they'll figure out what the best thing is to do in each of those cases.
Well, I think everybody should be worried about asbestos, and I think it's really quite extraordinary of the Secretary of State to say that and to be so cavalier with people's fears. There are ways of treating and managing the risk from asbestos, but just dismissing parents' very reasonable fears, which they will have today. I wonder how many parents really trust what the government is saying today, given that they've had months to come clean about the reinforced concrete problem. Why would anybody trust them today on this?
By Alessandro Capozzi, Executive Head Teacher Academy 21. It's an organisation working with over 800 schools across England and Wales. Alessandro, good morning to you. Have you been in touch over the last few days with head teachers that you work with? What's their reaction to all of this been?
Morning, Wilf. Yeah, we've been in touch with schools that we work with and other decision makers in education just to make sure that they know we're there to support as an online provider. Great sympathy goes out to them. I think that the reaction that you'll all be really familiar with is that head teachers are scrambling to make plans in different parts of the country to make sure they've got education and schooling for their children from the get-go. It's a challenging situation.
And how many of them do you think were sufficiently prepared or warned about this?
A good question. I wouldn't know the figure myself. I suspect that a number of them will have known, but the speed at which this has gathered pace over the summer, and the fact notice has been given to a further 100 or so schools just before the start of term, I think makes it very difficult for head teachers to prepare. I mean, we've got to remember at the same time we've got attendance as a major issue that schools are driving at improving. We've got preparing for the new term, getting teachers in, getting them trained and ready. Many of them will be doing work over the holiday as well. It's just another item I think that school leaders have to contend with. So I doubt many were prepared for this. But we've been here with major things before, like the pandemic, and I've got every faith that school leaders will be able to come through it.
I guess a lot of the coverage over the last couple of days has been this idea that, we can't push kids back to more online learning or that online learning is such a terrible fall-off in quality of learning for kids. I imagine you'll take the opposing view.
Yeah, we take a different view. I think what you've got to remember is everybody has an experience of online learning now that they didn't have 3 years ago. But it's obviously progressed in general in a huge way with technology, with the way teachers have been trained and that experience itself during the pandemic. What we would say at Academy 21 is that we're a purpose-built organisation. We're a purpose-built online provider. We work with well over 800 schools and thousands of kids every year. It's very different to what families will have experienced in schools in the pandemic. And that's why schools trust us. Our platform is bespoke. Our teachers are trained to teach online and have that presence. We're incredibly interactive as well. It's a really enjoyable experience. And for young people that need online, and it's not for every child, but for many that do, it can really be a gateway to improve attendance, improved outcomes, improve well-being. So I would say being open-minded about online learning and the future of education is very important. And actually, in the situation we're in now, you can see where online can have a really good role, because one thing it does is you can turn it on very, very quickly. And with an organisation like us, we can have schools using us within a matter of days. That's really valuable when you're faced with crises like RAT.
That's exactly what I was going to end. So if you already have an existing relationship with the school, you can boost the service you offer them within a couple of days, or to any school?
Yeah, absolutely, both. Absolutely. So the ones with existing relationship know how to use our products. They've been trained, but our teachers are incredible. We have many teachers. They're all the lessons they're delivered live. They're fully qualified teachers ready to go. So we can add other schools in as well. And what I'd say, as we say to everybody, if you've got a need, and it may not be to do with concrete, or that could be the most pressing thing, but you've got a child where it's just not working, you can turn something on with us that really supports them in very short notice. The capacity's there, and the will as well. We're a very large organisation, part of a bigger group, and like with all online providers, it's something that can really work for young people.
Alessandra, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, one of our top stories today, Sir Keir Starmer is in the process of a mini reshuffle of his shadow cabinet. As we heard from earlier, Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates is outside Portcullis House as MPs are returning as well. They're back to school day today also, and he has been chasing down some members of the shadow cabinet who might be in the crosshairs today for Sir Keir Starmer, and he just briefly caught up with Ed Miliband.
And good morning. Do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet? Good morning. Do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet today?
These are decisions for the leader. I used to have to make these decisions. I'd never liked reshuffle days, but I'm getting on with my job very happily. And do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet? Do you want to stay in your environment brief? Is that what you're committed to? I love my job. I really care about it.
And do you remember how hard these days could be?
For the leader, very hard.
So it's not fun for Keir Starmer today. You remember that? Do you think the team can be sharpened up?
I think we've got an excellent team.
But an even more excellent team on the way. What are the?
I think we've got an excellent team.
Are you going to say?
Sure, we'll have an excellent
and what do we say? And what do we say to Jim McMahon? He's stepped down.
Take care.
Well, my producer said this was brief, this clip, and not much to it. I thought it was excellent, and a lot to it, of course. Ed Miliband's been through this process before. He knows he had to stay tight-lipped. He might be in the crosshairs. We don't know, but clearly a bit awkward there, and not wanting to say anything in either direction. More from Sir Keir Starmer's announcements today, and much more importantly, Sam Coates' analysis of it throughout the course of this morning. Now, a reminder of the breaking news this hour. A 21-year-old man has been sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of sexually assaulting and murdering his 16-year-old sister. Connor Gibson was convicted of attacking Amber Gibson in woodland areas in South Lanarkshire in November of 2021. We have some sound now from the judge.
She would have looked to you as her big brother for support. She was looking forward to meeting up with you on the night she was murdered. She even posted a selfie of both of you on Snapchat. You walked with her to Cadzow Glen. There you beat her about the head, breaking her nose, removed her clothing, and sexually assaulted her with intent to rape, and then manually strangled her to death. The last person she saw alive was you, her brother, strangling the life out of her, having beaten her up and tried to rape her. What you did was truly evil.
Truly evil, the words there of the judge. Now, some of today's other news now. Well, temperatures could reach 32 Celsius in parts of the UK this week, what forecasters are calling a last dose of summer. By the end of the week, it could be termed an official heat wave if temperatures remain high for 3 days or more. Health experts are warning people to stay hydrated and use sunscreen. It comes after one of the wettest July months on record, but coincides with children, of course, returning to school. In Spain, some train lines have been shut down and people have been told to stay indoors after intense rains brought flooding near Madrid and its surrounding areas. Flash flooding has already caused the banks of Catalonia's Ebro River to burst. F1 driver Carlos Sainz has reportedly been the target of an attempted robbery in Milan, hours after finishing third in the Italian Grand Prix. According to reports, Sainz was approached by 3 men outside the Armani Hotel in Milan. They took his £500,000 watch, but Sainz and several passers-by chased them down. Tens of thousands of partygoers are stranded in the mud after the Burning Man festival in the US state of Nevada was hit by unusually heavy rains. 3 months' worth of rain fell in just 3 days during the desert, turning the desert landscape, into a mud bath. Organisers closed the gates and urged festival goers to conserve food and fuel. One person's been reported dead over the weekend, although it's not clear if this was related to the weather conditions. One festival goer, Jen, sent us this from the site.
I know some of you folks at home, you might have some loved ones out here and you're worried about them because I'm getting messages on TikTok of please giving people updates. So I've been trying to do that, but people are in good spirits. It's wet, it's wet, it's muddy, and it's supposed to rain again tonight and possibly tomorrow, which means that we might not be leaving here until Thursday because it takes usually two full days for the playa to dry off. But there are things like this camp back here, Does Fish. They serve fuzz soup all day long, so people are lining up there for soup because it's actually pretty chilly out today, and they're hungry, so camps are feeding them. So even though the rain is changing up people's plans, it's still okay. Usually veteran burners will do what we call decompression after burn, and that is to go somewhere and kind of think about the experiences you had and the people you met, and some harness the creativity. Like me, I'm doing a rewrite on my novel, so that's not going to be happening this year, but that's okay. I can do it when I get home. So I hope you're all doing okay in the default world. Everybody's enjoying Burning Man. I'll see if I can get a shot of the playa for you.
There at Burning Man in Nevada. We've got another breaking news story. It's relating to James Watson, who was given a minimum 15-year jail term for murdering 6-year-old Ricky Neve in Peterborough in 1994, and he's lost an appeal against his conviction that was taking place today. Let's go back to some of those other news stories that we were running through. A bright object, thought to be a meteor, has been filmed lighting up the night sky over Turkey. This video shows the spectacle over the city of Erzurum and the Gumuşehir province, in the east of the country. Local media says authorities are yet to confirm what it was. You're watching Sky News today. Coming up, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky has replaced his defence minister amid allegations of corruption in his ministry. We'll have more on that story after the break.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
One doesn't know quite how great one is. From time to time, somebody says, "Oh, you're great," you know, but it's the people that make you great. Whatever it is that you do, the people. It's all about the people. And so I feel good that the people have chosen to induct me into this august body. When something happens like this, you think, man, has it been so long? I don't feel that old. I don't feel that I was making music that long, but it's been longer than that, obviously, because I have had 2 careers. You have to understand that what we're talking about here is not a spurious nonsense. It is the greatest crime against a body of human beings to whom a multitude of wrongs have been done. I think that politicians and others who seek to make political mileage out of it are wrong. I've been disappointed in my country's approach to it because, you know, everybody talks about paying reparations. It's not just about paying reparations. Before you can even get to that, you have to recognize that what you've done as a body, I mean, Europe, there are many countries that didn't engage in the African slave trade. We're not talking to them. We're talking to the people who have done so.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. It's like Emirates, it's like better.
Welcome back. We've got some more breaking news on that Labour reshuffle. Let's get out to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, it's quite a high-profile one. What have we learned?
That's right. Well, possibly the biggest move of the reshuffle just announced by the Labour leader's office, Angela Rayner. Now, she's going to be moving to the levelling up brief. There have been rumours of this for some time. Effectively, she's been given the ability to shadow a big government department. It's something that Keir Starmer wanted her to do. There are 2 very important add-ons for her job. She maintains the work brief, which is very important to the left of the party, that some feared that she might lose. So that is, she will continue to oversee the Labour Party's very significant attempts and proposals to change the way that work legislation, union rights, labour rights work. And secondly, she has been given formally, what we've long expected, the title of Shadow Deputy Prime Minister. So she will, therefore, it seems, inherit the job, if Labour ever get into the government, of the title of Deputy Prime Minister. So a big move. We don't know what happens to Lisa Nandy, who had that job, but the Labour reshuffle is now underway, and possibly the biggest move, Angela Rayner going to the Levelling Up Department, has just been announced.
Sam, great stuff. We look forward to a big recap at the top of the hour, analysis of what we've learned so far, perhaps more breaking developments on that reshuffle between now and then too, Sam Coates. Thank you. Now, back to some other news. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has replaced his defence minister amid allegations of corruption within his government, claims Alexei Reznikov has dismissed himself. Well, let's bring in our military analyst, Sean Bell. Sean, first question, I mean, why, in your assessment, was Reznikov removed from post?
Leslie Reznikov, he's been Ukrainian defence minister since February 21, so a considerable period of time. It was just dismissed apparently last night as President Zelensky's nightly address, apparently a time for a new approach. But it's not entirely clear because he actually submitted a letter of resignation. You're never quite sure of the language difficulties involved in this. Reznikov has been responsible for securing billions of dollars of Western aid and also for reshuffling the MOD, helping Ukrainian MOD get preparations for joining NATO. The 57-year-old has not been accused of anything himself, but during his time, the Ukrainian MOD did have a series of scandals about vastly overpaying for food and stuff like that. His dismissal has to be set in the context of a wider anti-corruption effort, because if Ukraine is ever to join the EU, that has to be nailed down. It's interesting, the word corruption, though, it strikes a chord with us in the UK, but you used to have a Ukrainian interpreter here at Sky, and they warned me, just be careful, because Ukraine used to be a sort of province of the former Soviet Union, suffered dreadful privations, and it became a nation of survivors, and that will take a while to transform. His replacement, Rustem Umerov, has very good credentials, but no background in defence.
Does it change the implications of the war?
Short answer, no. The minister looks upwards and outwards. He looks to try and secure money, engagement with politicians, engagement with the international community. In Syria, the Ukrainian MOD, General Valery Zaluzny, who's the commander of the armed forces in Ukraine, absolutely maintains the same. We'll expect to see the military strategy to maintain the same. There may be an element of risk, in other words, because political decides about risk, but the strategy will be the same. The key, though, here is that the Western support for Ukraine has been absolutely invaluable. Reznikov's part has been invaluable. There's speculation he might become Ukrainian's ambassador to the UK as a result of this. Continuity can be good. 500 days in the post, a fresh set of eyes could also be good. So I don't think we should read too much into this.
Sure, as always. Thanks so much. We are going to have a quick look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
High pressure will dominate this week, bringing heatwave conditions and potentially the highest temperatures of the year. It'll be mostly very warm today, hot in the south and windy near northern and southwestern coasts. The afternoon will bring unbroken sunshine to most, but the far north will be cloudy with a little drizzly rain, mainly for the Shetland Isles. The south of Ireland will see clouds developing as well. Well, most places will stay warm and dry overnight, but the far north will see some drizzly outbreaks, while Cornwall and the south of Ireland may catch a few potentially thundery showers. Starry skies will bring some mist and fog as well, with eastern parts most at risk. Tomorrow will be mostly sunny again after early fog lifts, but northern Scotland will be rather grey, while Ireland will be cloudier, with the chance of the odd thundery shower in the west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You are watching Sky News today with Wilfred Froston. Coming up, much more live reaction and the developments as they come from that Labour reshuffle that has just seen Angela Rayner appointed Shadow Levelling Up Secretary. We'll be right back out to Portcullis House and the surrounding area in Westminster after the short break. This is Sky News Today with Wilfred Frost. It's 11 o'clock. Your headlines. Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner becoming Shadow Levelling Up Secretary in Sir Keir Starmer's pre-election reshuffle. Also ahead, as schools return, many children don't. The cost of crumbling concrete will be millions, and some pupils will be forced to homeschool.
We'll only have 3-year groups in at a time on a bit of a rota, and then they'll spend the rest of their time doing remote learning, similar to what happened during COVID.
We will have to rebuild and refurbish. So the first thing is to get the schools open.
A 21-year-old man caught on CCTV has been sentenced to at least 22 years after being found guilty of sexually assaulting and murdering his 16-year-old sister. Ukraine's president replaces his defence minister after months of allegations that his department was mired in corruption. Temperatures set to top 30 degrees Celsius in the UK, a late summer heatwave.
And coming up on past on Business Live with me, Ian King will be exploring why the price of oil is at its highest level since January.
A very good morning to you. A Labour reshuffle is underway in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. The first major change, Deputy Labour leader Angela Rayner has been appointed Shadow Levelling Up Secretary and Shadow Deputy Prime Minister. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins me now. And Sam, the headline so far is this move for Angela Rayner. Just explain to us the significance of it for someone, of course, who in the past Sir Keir Starmer had clashed with but is on better terms today?
That's right, Wilf. So this is the first reshuffle that Keir Starmer has done, this big, proper reshuffle since a rather chaotic affair in May 2021. He's going to be looking to stamp his authority. And so probably the biggest move of this reshuffle has been to take Angela Rayner, who is elected as deputy of the leader of the Labour Party, so has her own mandate, and to give her a government department. So until now, Angela Rayner has had a kind of floating brief as Keir Starmer's deputy. She's been in charge of all those kind of work issues, labour issues, employment relation proposals. And shadowed some elements of cabinet office, so she's been going after ministers on the Tory side who they think have broken rules or misbehaved, and she's led on all of that. Now she's been given a big government department in order to shadow that, and it's the Levelling Up department. So this means that Angela Rayner will be in charge of trying to help communities in deprived areas do better and be put in charge of kind of Labour's mission to improve communities. This is a big deal. It means that Angela Rayner will face Michael Gove across the dispatch box. Now, some had characterised that move potentially as something of a demotion. So it comes with a couple of big, important baubles along the side. First of all, for the first time, even though Angela Rayner had said it before, Keir Starmer had not, now he is confirming Angela Rayner will be Deputy Prime Minister. So she's now Shadow Prime Minister, and she'll take the title of Deputy if Labour go into government. And she also retains that work brief, which is quite important for the left of the party. They were fearing if it was taken away, it might be watered down. We don't know what happens to Lisa Nandy. She's currently in the Levelling Up brief, or was until about 20 minutes ago. Jim McMahon, the Shadow Environment Secretary, has also written to Keir Starmer asking to stand down. He's been the victim of abuse and also had health problems.
So, Sam, I'm interested here, if this continues to play out with none of the top 3 officers of state being reshuffled, that indeed this move with Angela Rayner perhaps is the most high profile of the moves, what does that imply about both the standing of the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer as things are? Does he not need to do a bigger reshuffle because things are going so well? But perhaps more tellingly, his power internally, his grip on the party. Should he be doing more, but he's just not able to? Or is he just so relaxed that things are going so well that there's no need?
If I'm completely honest, Wilf, I'm not going to call the end of the reshuffle. I'm not even going to say that Angela Rayner will be the biggest news by the end of the day. We just don't know. We haven't had it confirmed that all three top officers of state are definitely staying in place. What we do understand is that those shadow cabinet ministers who represent those 5 missions that Keir Starmer's been spelling out, they will stay in place. That leaves an intriguing option, actually, that they could do something about David Lammy, but they may choose not to. He is in favour with some, not with others. He's had controversies in his role as Shadow Foreign Secretary with the fact that he's got a second job on a broadcaster at the weekend, which takes up some of his time and for which he receives quite a lot of cash. That has made him unpopular with some in the party, so we'll keep an eye on him. But more generally, you ask about Keir Starmer's power, and he is at the height of his internal power in many ways. He's dealt with many of his left critics. He now has the flexibility to pick the team that he needs. That's not something that many Labour leaders of the recent past could say. I got up with Ed Miliband and asked him, he shadows climate change, whether or not he wanted to stay in this job. And also, we had a bit of a chat about what it's like being Labour leader since he was in the job once upon a time. Ed Miliband, good morning. Do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet? Good morning. Do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet today?
These are decisions for the leader. I used to have to make these decisions. I'd never liked reshuffle days, but I'm getting on with my job very happily.
And do you expect to stay in the shadow cabinet? Do you want to stay in your environment brief? Is that what you're committed to?
I love my job. I really care about it.
And do you remember how hard these days could be?
For the leader, very hard.
So it's not fun for Keir Starmer today. You remember that? Do you think the team can be sharpened up?
I think we've got an excellent team.
But an even more excellent team on the way. What are the?
I think we've got an excellent team.
Are you going to say?
Sure, we'll have an excellent
and what do we say? And what do we say to Jim McMahon? He's stepped down.
Take care.
There could be more on the Labour reshuffle at any moment. So stay tuned to Sky News. Wilf.
Sam, thank you so much. We look forward to much more coverage throughout the morning, indeed early afternoon, when there are further developments in that reshuffle. And, of course, later on this evening, do not miss Politics Hub with Sophie Ridge. It starts, relaunches tonight, 7 p.m. It's going to be appointment viewing every night of the week. And it's the first show tonight. Lots for Sophie and the team to get their teeth into. Now, on that note, to the concrete crisis that's affecting schools across the country. As some pupils in England go back to school today, some will face the prospect of online learning, while others will be moved into temporary accommodation as urgent repairs are carried out on school buildings built with reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, or RAC. Well, this morning, the Education Secretary insisted the cost of the repairs will be covered by the government and most schools affected will remain open. Julian Keegan also told Sky News that engineering surveys are ongoing to determine the extent of the issue at schools across the country.
We will have to rebuild and refurbish. So the first thing is to get the schools open, minimise the disruption to education. So that will be temporary accommodation propping. The next part of it, and there may be some revenue costs as well, and then the next part of it will be to get a plan to rebuild or partially rebuild if it's only in part of a
But many millions of pounds.
Yes, I would think so. Yes, okay. to rebuild schools, and some of them are already rebuilding. Yeah. But there'll be more. We will have to rebuild.
Well, here's a reminder of what we know in terms of timelines. Well, 104 schools in England are partly or fully closed due to RAC concrete. The government's yet to release, though, the full list of the names of the affected sites. Engineering surveys are ongoing at schools across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. So far, 35 schools have been found to have this concrete in Scotland. But the government there says none pose an immediate risk to students, while the Welsh government says councils and colleges there have not reported any presence of RAC. Honeywood School in Essex is one affected school with the concrete found in 22 areas of their facility, including classrooms, bathrooms and the staff room. Head teacher James Saunders said it will cause significant disruption to the start of term.
We've put an immediate 2-week action plan in place. However, that's already going to create some disruption. We stagger the start of term and just have Year 7s in for the first 2 days. They were scheduled to start tomorrow. We've delayed that for another day to help prep the site and adjust the timetable ready. So they'll come in on Wednesday and Thursday. Then we're going to bring Year 11s on Friday, and then as of next Monday, we'll only have 3 year groups in at a time on a bit of a rota, and then they'll spend the rest of their time doing remote learning, similar to what happened during COVID.
Well, Sky's Rachel Venables joins me now from a school in Colchester. And Rachel, what's been the reaction, not just to the news, but the timing and I guess the lack of advance warning that schools were given about this?
Well, I think there's a deep sense of frustration for the teachers, no doubt the parents and the students as well here at Honeywood School, and also no lack of stress for the head teacher, James Saunders, for the senior leadership team who got that alert with just days to go until the start of the school term, of the new school year, in fact, after the summer holidays, that they were going to have to rip apart their timetable and return for a huge swathes of the school body to remote learning. You heard him there talking about how just 3 school years at a time will be able to come to this school. They should be right now, the teachers getting ready to welcome the new cohort of Year 7s from tomorrow. That's been pushed back a day. And instead they're trying to work out how on earth they can operate with such a huge part of the building itself out of action, including several classrooms, part of the staff room, bathrooms, the medical centre, the computer labs, the list goes on. And of course, this is just one school. We know that there are more than 100 that got that alert at the end of last week, and that there are potentially, it could be hundreds more around the country that have RAC, this crumbly concrete in place in some way, the bit that haven't reported back to the Department for Education. So there's a huge amount of pressure on these teachers, and growing pressure still 4 or 5 days into this crisis on the government as well, particularly as it's been reported this morning that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, when Chancellor, slashed funding in the Department for Education for the patching, the repairing, the rebuilding of schools across the country. We heard from the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, this morning saying that it would cost many millions of pounds to repair these buildings, but that funding would come from Department of Education budgets. For now, of course, the question for these teachers, these students, the parents, is how long is it going to take to get schools like this back up and running, with additional concerns also raised this morning about the existence of asbestos in many of our schools across the country. Could the remediation works around RAC reignite that crisis as well and expose asbestos, only delaying the problem further? These issues just ramping right up and up today.
Rachel, thanks so much for that. Now, in the past few minutes, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been speaking to Sky's Rob Powell on behalf of broadcasters. Of course, this topic came up. Let's listen in.
Well, new information came to light relatively recently, and it's important that once it had that the government acted on it as swiftly as possible. Of course, I know the timing is frustrating, but I want to give people a sense of the scale of what we're grappling with here. There are around 22,000 schools in England, and the important thing to know is we expect that 95% of those schools won't be impacted by this. Around 50 schools have already been mitigated. Another 100 are in the process of being so. And our expectation is in a matter of weeks, the bulk of the remaining schools that will have this issue will be identified as well. Also important context to know that in many cases, this could be limited to a single classroom, for example. So people should have a sense of the scale of what might be happening as well.
The former Permanent Secretary at Department for Education has said this morning that when they wanted to put more money into repairing schools, you as Chancellor didn't allow that to go ahead and in fact cut that budget. Are you to blame for what's happening now? And do you want to apologise to parents and pupils?
No, I think that is completely and utterly wrong. Actually, one of the first things I did as Chancellor in my first spending review in 2020 was to announce a new 10-year school rebuilding programme for 500 schools. Now, that equates to about 50 schools a year that will be refurbished or rebuilt. And if you look at what we've been doing over the previous decade, that's completely in line with what we've always done, about 50 or so schools a year refurbished or rebuilt. That's what I announced as Chancellor in my first spending review. On top of that, I also invested £5 billion to help our kids catch up with lost learning from COVID, the Education Recovery Programme. I think you'll remember at the time, that was rightly a priority of the country to help our kids who've been disrupted by COVID with extra tutoring, for example, to help them catch up. And that cost £5 billion, which I invested in as Chancellor.
Well, the Prime Minister there pushing back on the idea that these problems in schools because of the RAC concrete was anything to do with his time as Chancellor, saying that's completely and utterly wrong. He also said in many cases some of these schools affected might have problems limited to one room only. A reminder, if you scan the QR code on the screen now, you can see a list compiled by Sky News of the schools impacted by the ongoing concrete scandal, or go straight to our website news.sky.com for more coverage. A reminder of another story that broke in the course of this morning. Former Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson's been found to have bullied former Chief Whip Wendy Morton about his failure to be invited to the late Queen's funeral. The independent expert panel said they carefully considered a suspension from the Commons, but said Mr Williamson should offer a full and unreserved apology, as well as completing a behaviour training course instead. A 21-year-old man has been sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of sexually assaulting and murdering his 16-year-old sister. Connor Gibson was convicted of attacking Amber Gibson in a woodland area in South Lanarkshire in November 2021. The judge, Lord Mulholland, outlined details from the case which some viewers might find distressing.
She would have looked to you as a big brother for support. She was looking forward to meeting up with you on the night she was murdered. She even posted a selfie of both of you on Snapchat. You walked with her to Cadzow Glen. There you beat her about the head, breaking her nose, removed her clothing, and sexually assaulted her with intent to rape, and then manually strangled her to death. The last person she saw alive was you, her brother, strangling the life out of her, having beaten her up and tried to rape her. What you did was truly evil.
Well, our correspondent Matthew Thompson joins me now from Livingston High Court. And Matthew, just that short soundbite captures the sort of harrowing nature of this case.
Depraved was the word used in court, as well as you heard the judge there say evil. Connor Gibson, his crimes were detailed there by the judge, but he also tried to cover those crimes up. But within 3 days of her body being found, Amber's body being found, he was arrested. And that was in spite of him doing things like posting a chilling tribute to Amber on Facebook. And ultimately, CCTV and forensic evidence exposed his lies for what they were. He'll spend a minimum of 22 years behind bars for his crimes. But what also makes this story even more extraordinary is that another man, Stephen Corrigan, was sentenced to 9 years in prison today. And that was for, instead of, when he found Amber's body in the woodlands, immediately alerting police, he indecently and sexually touched her body and then tried to hide it, effectively preventing the police from investigating and bringing her killer, Connor Gibson, to justice. The judge told Mr. Corrigan that any decent human being on finding the body of a young girl would have immediately informed the authorities. He did not, and for that, he'll spend 9 years behind bars.
Thank you. Now, we've got some live pictures of that meeting between President Putin and President Erdogan of Turkey. Of course, they are meeting in Sochi in Russia, and lots on the agenda, of course, a large part of it being touted as being about the grain export deal that has been on and then off again of late. Our international correspondent John Sparks able to come back in. And John, just remind us of the significance of this meeting and outside of the grain deal, in addition to the grain deal, what's on the agenda?
Well, the two countries have a very close relationship. Erdogan, very interesting, actually. He's positioned Turkey in a sort of honest broker role, the country that can both talk to countries in the West and can talk to Russia as well. And he has taken upon himself to really try and get the Black Sea Grain Initiative up and running. And here we can see them in this meeting. There's no audio from this meeting, but we can see that they are actually meeting in Sochi, where Putin has one of his main residences on the Black Sea, his summer residence, if you will. The Black Sea Agreement, it is a really important, it's a big deal. It's an important thing. It was signed in July of 2022. It basically allowed Ukraine to get its grain, its wheat, its barley, its vegetable oils out through the Black Sea and export it onto world markets. That's important because Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of these foodstuffs. Russia then pulled out 1 year later, much to the alarm of organizations like the World Food Programme and others, citing severe hunger, food crises in many countries around the world, in Africa, the Middle East. So they and many others want this Black Sea agreement up and running, but the Russians have their own particular set of demands which make it easier for them to sell their wheat, their barley, their fertilizer on world markets. And unless they see movement from the West, they're probably not going to move. So I think Erdogan has got his work cut out for him this afternoon.
John, thanks so much for that. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, we'll be speaking to a former Labour insider about the reshuffle that is going on in Sir Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet. We'll be right back.
One doesn't know quite how great one is. From time to time, somebody says, "Oh, you're great," but it's the people that make you great. Whatever it is that you do, the people. It's all about the people. And so I feel good that the people have chosen to induct me into this august body. When something happens like this, you think, man, has it been so long? I don't feel that old. I don't feel that I was making music that long, but it's been longer than that, obviously, because I have had 2 careers. You have to understand that what we're talking about here is not a spurious nonsense. It is the greatest crime against a body of human beings to whom a multitude of wrongs have been done. I think that politicians and others who seek to make political mileage out of it are wrong. I've been disappointed in my country's approach to it because, everybody talks about paying reparations. It's not just about paying reparations. Before you can even get to that, you have to recognize that what you've done as a body, Europe, there are many countries that didn't engage in the African slave trade. We're not talking to them. We're talking to the people who have done so.
Welcome back. We've got some breaking news very quickly for you. It relates to Chris Pincher, the former Tory chief whip. He's lost his appeal against an 8-week suspension from the Commons. Of course, that relates to allegations that he drunkenly groped 2 men in a London club. It therefore paves the way for a potential by-election in his Tamworth seat. Still a few hurdles to go through, but it does look probably more likely than not now that there'll be another by-election for the Tories to face, potentially on the same day as the Mid-Beds one, which hasn't had its date confirmed yet, or perhaps worse, if it's on a separate date and creates 2 more by-election stories. Let's pivot to some other breaking news in the political front to get back out to our deputy political editor, Sam Coates. Sam, you told us earlier in the show that the new job that Angela Rayner was getting, it, of course, pushed Lisa Nandy out of her role. What's she getting instead?
She's getting what is, to all intents and purposes, a demotion. Lisa Nandy will be, in the words of Labour, because this isn't a formal job to shadow, she has been appointed Shadow Cabinet Minister for International Development. Now, let me unpack the significance of that. There is not a cabinet post anymore for international development. Boris Johnson scrapped the Department for International Development. So, in effect, she will be probably shadowing the Minister of State level. She'll be a sort of shadow number 2 in the Foreign Office. This is unambiguously a demotion. She will still attend cabinet, but nevertheless, this is Lisa Nandy having her wings clipped by the Labour leader. And it's a particularly brutal act by Keir Starmer because it was not that long ago that Lisa Nandy was the shadow Foreign Secretary. So the number 1 shadowing the Foreign Office, not the number 2. And so this will be a difficult pill to swallow, but swallow she has done. I've got a quote from a source close to Lisa Nandy. This says, We are proud of the work Lisa has done, spearheading some of the most exciting policy in housing and devolution. Lisa is a team player and looks forward to getting stuck in to her new role. So the choice for Lisa Nandy, very bluntly, was to accept this demotion from Keir Starmer and stay inside the tent, or to walk out altogether and probably be more difficult from the backbenchers. She's chosen the first of those two options. She is remaining, and she is regarded by some in the Labour Party, in the Labour movement, as a good TV performer. So she will continue to sell Keir Starmer's message. The suggestion was always people around Keir Starmer didn't quite trust Lisa Nandy, thought that she was loyal enough to him personally. She took him on in the leadership contest, was a bit of an outsider. He won. I think their relationship has always, on a personal level, been a little bit rocky. But now one of the key bits of the jigsaw has been revealed. Lisa Nandy to be the number 2 in the Foreign Office, or in their words, Shadow International Development Secretary.
Sam, literally 30 seconds. What could be the most high-profile move left? Do you think we've had the most high-profile yet, or we don't know?
I think there's still lots to come. Let's see what Keir Starmer wants to do. If that's it, it's a bit of a mini reshuffle, but let's see how the day unfolds.
Sam Coates, as always, thank you so much. Sam will be on that for you throughout the rest of the morning, indeed the early afternoon, and of course he'll be back with some great analysis this evening with Sophie Ridge, the all-new Sophie Ridge relaunch show, 7 p.m. Mondays to Fridays. Let's have a little look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
High pressure will dominate this week, bringing heatwave conditions and potentially the highest temperatures of the year. It'll be mostly very warm today and hot in the south, but it will be windy near northern and southwestern coasts. The afternoon will bring unbroken sunshine for most, but the far north will be cloudy with a little drizzly rain, mainly for Shetland. The south of Ireland will see cloud developing too. Most places will stay warm and dry overnight, but the far north will see some drizzly outbreaks, while Cornwall and the south of Ireland may catch a few potentially thundery showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You are watching Sky News, and coming up, Ian King will be speaking to the RAC about rising fuel prices, which have ticked up a lot, crude oil prices of late. He'll have it all up next.